Let's continue our discussion about romantic love by talking about short-term love, which is love that exists between when first meeting and roughly 6 months of the relationship. This love period is characterized by feelings of happiness, sleeplessness, and loss of appetite. The reason for this is because short-term love like this is associated with high levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. These are natural stimulants in the brain that provide feelings of joy. Dopamine makes you addicted to your partner. As we talked about before, the only time you feel happiness or pleasure is when you see pictures of your partner, hear from your partner, or spend time with your partner. And norepinephrine makes you also focus on your partner, as it causes sweaty hands, your heart to beat faster, a lack of sleep, and appetite, by stimulating regions of your brain that help you focus on one sole task. The initial feelings of love are also associated with low levels of serotonin. Serotonin is a hormone in the body that affects mood, sleep, appetite, and sexuality. It regulates normal day-to-day activity so that you're able to just focus on activities required for life, like eating and sleeping. However, when your hormone levels of serotonin are low, then you focus less on these life-sustaining activities like eating and sleeping and more on one other task, allowing your brain to focus on one object, resulting in obsessive thinking. This interchange and interplay between these different hormones to help you focus on just the object of your romantic partner and not on anything else in particular, lasts for about 6 months of love. These low levels of serotonin also contribute to feelings of jealousy. Then we have long-term love. Long-term love is anything that exists after 6 months of being in a romantic relationship with a single individual. These are associated with feelings of calm, peace, security, especially when with someone for a long time. The reason why we have these feelings of calm, peace, and security with an individual is associated with increased levels of vasopressin, oxytocin, and endorphins. Endorphins are the main long-term love hormone in that they provide happiness without addiction. So they're different than dopamine that way. There is no jealousy, no obsession, and you're free to live your life knowing that your romantic partner will be there at all times. Vasopressin, as we mentioned in previous lectures, is involved in creating memories during passionate situations. This allows you to form bonds with your romantic partner, especially after engaging in emotionally charged situations, including sex, but also really fun adventures, vacations, and so forth. Vasopressin is also involved in clarity of thought and alertness at those times. Vasopressin, as we talked about before, is also involved in monogamy, specifically in mammals. First studies were done in prairie voles and meadow voles. Meadow voles are polygamous, whereas prairie voles are monogamous. The prairie vole's monogamy is associated with the fact that when vasopressin is released in its brain, the vasopressin results in a strong feeling of joy and pleasure when the male hangs around the female again in the future, resulting in pair bonding and pair formation between this partnership. However, in the meadow vole, there is no receptor for vasopressin, so when vasopressin spikes in the brain during sexual activity, there is no way of remembering that mating partner again in the future. This vasopressin receptor dynamic is also seen in some humans. Studies have shown that men, human males, also have vasopressin receptors in their brain, and some men have a receptor that is a little different than other men in that it doesn't send the pleasure signals as strong. Those with the variant vasopressin receptor are more likely to have had divorces and tumultuous marriages, whereas men with the stronger vasopressin receptor that sends a stronger feeling of joy and pleasure with a romantic partner are less likely to have divorced in the past. Scientists have also been able to genetically engineer meadow voles to have the prairie vole receptor in them, switching meadow voles to from a polygamous state to a monogamous state, indicating that at least in the vole, the only factor that contributes to monogamy is the presence or absence of this vasopressin receptor. In human males, this is very likely not the case. There are likely many compounding factors that lead to polygamy or monogamy in human males, but the vasopressin receptor might be a component. We also talked about how oxytocin is involved with pair bonding and forming trust between the mother and the child. Oxytocin is also involved in long-term romantic relationships. It is what's referred to as the cuddling hormone because it's stimulated and produced anytime a person cuddles with a romantic partner, with a child, or even with a pet. Oxytocin also increases during sexual intercourse, especially after orgasms. This further forms pair bonding between the two partners with each contact, cuddle, and orgasm. Serotonins are also involved in long-term relationships because they are likely to increase back to normal levels so that both partners are no longer obsessed with just the relationship and can go back and focus on sleeping properly, eating properly, and so forth. Finally, another thing that we see in long-term monogamous relationships is that testosterone levels of both partners drop. This, of course, would have an effect on sex drive, where both partners, after the first 6 months of a relationship, find that their sex drive decreases along with their testosterone levels. But testosterone is also known to result in behavioral differences such as aggression. And in long-term monogamous relationships, the drop in testosterone levels is also associated with a drop in behavioral aggression and violence. This makes married men more likely to behave in society better and less likely to be criminals, which is exactly what we see with social studies. They are also less likely to cheat if they're in long-term monogamous relationships than if they're not. Well, that's it for our Biology of Love lecture. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot. Something to keep in mind when you next talk to your parents or your romantic partners.